Hi, Ed Munoz here, Webster University student, going through the Project Management Certificate program right now. And today I wanted to discuss with you how to build a sump tank for your reef aquarium. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with exactly what a reef tank may be, or a sump tank, basically you have your saltwater aquarium, which is referred to as a reef tank. And then a sump tank is the tank that's underneath that tank where you place all your equipment. There are a lot of benefits to having a sump tank, although you really don't have to have a sump tank with your display tank if you elect not to have. But as we go on with this presentation, I'll explain to you the benefits, and you'll obviously see the benefits of having a sump tank in addition to your actual aquarium. So sit back, enjoy, and hopefully you'll learn a little something. I'll be back. Okay, so here you see my tank, which for the most part does not have the sump tank yet. And you can see how all the filtration equipment is hanging from the back of the tank, along with all the bubbles that are created from the skimmer. The skimmer is a type of filtration. Actually takes the proteins and waste out of the water, and then when it's put in the water back in the tank, it makes those little bubbles, which are not, for me, attractive at all. There's others that would argue that say they like the bubbles, but I rather have nice, clear, clean, clear water. I think it makes the tank look a lot nicer, and also not, I don't like having all those filters, the other canister filters in the back as well. You can see the tubes coming down in the back. And the sump tank's going to make it so that I can get rid of all that stuff. Next, you'll see a video of my baby clown, which is paired up with an anemone. Again, you can see how the bubbles and all that is in the tank and just doesn't look good. I guarantee you, I promise you'll see the difference once I get the sump tank in place. You'll see a big difference on how the tank's gonna look. Also, another thing that I forgot to mention was that with those filters hanging in the back, there's a potential for your anemones. The anemones are those guys that look like weird things moving around. Those things, they'll walk around, they'll climb up the glass, and they can get into the filter. I've lost 2 of them already due to that. They get sucked up in our filter, and so again with the sump tank you won't have that issue. Okay, so that's that. Moving on, I just wanted to talk, since this is a project, and there's certain parts of a project that I want to discuss. First ones, I just went over the benefits of why I want to do a sump tank, the benefits of a sump tank, and again you'll see here it improves the water quality drastically, and one of the reasons why is that you have more filtration in that tank underneath. I'm adding another filter to this sump tank along with some algae and a live rock that also helps out with the filtration. You can see the second bullet there. It also makes it a lot easier to do water changes, and also I went too far forward. I want to back up a little bit. The water, the smaller your tank is, the quicker the water changes. So just as an example, say phosphates. If your phosphates are going in the wrong direction, they'll go in the wrong direction quicker. And a tank that's smaller versus a larger amount of water, it'll take longer for that to happen. So it's actually easier to maintain a larger tank versus a smaller tank, which is what I have right now. I have a 20-gallon. So the 10-gallon sump is actually going to add 10 gallons to 20, so now it'd be a 30-gallon. So it's going to slow that water change down a little bit. And it's also, what I was talking about earlier was that it'll make the water changes easier, being that the sump tank is going to be underneath the display tank now. So it just makes it easier to take the water out because the tank is just lower. It's on or towards the floor, and it'll just make it easier to drain some water from that tank and add new water instead of having to pick, say, a 5-gallon bucket up of water and pouring it into your main tank, which is what I've been doing. And so that's a lot harder. So the sump tank will make it easier. And then along with that goes reducing the stress on your fish whenever you're doing anything with your main tank. If you don't have a sump, you're doing everything in that main tank, so the fish get pretty stressed out when you're sticking your hand in there and moving things around and adding water to it and all of that. Fish don't like that, so they get pretty stressed. So that's going to be relieved. That's all of that would take place now in the sump tank. Okay, and as I've mentioned, the greatest benefit, I think, really, is just the fact that you're not going to see all that stuff in your main display tank anymore. For me, it makes it all worthwhile. So those are the benefits. Next, I want to talk about the project plan. We have a few phases here. We have the design phase, which for the most part, I had to go out and I did some research on different ways to build sumps and how to build a sump. Thanks to YouTube, helped me out a lot on that, and my local pet stores. And you can see also that the next thing was developing a team to do this. Well, for the most part, I was my own team, besides doing a little outsourcing to my wife, which actually helped place some of the silicone on the glass partitions. So she was part of my development team or design team. Actually, development team, yes. And so with the design phase also, I had to go get supplies. I had to figure out where to get, especially the glass partitions, which I wasn't sure. I've never done anything like this before. So I had to figure out where to get these glass partitions. I ended up going to Lowe's and actually ended up getting acrylic versus glass, which is the acrylic is more it's plastic versus a glass, and they cut it for me, which was great. I didn't have to mess around with cutting it because I knew I would mess that up. So they cut that, and so that worked out great. So the next phase was the development phase, which was actually putting this sump tank together. And you'll see, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's basically a 10-gallon tank, 10-gallon tank with some dividers in it. Divides it into a few different sections, and I'll show you here in a little bit what that looks like. And then the last or second to last phase, the implementation phase, where I actually added water, okay, and made sure there weren't any leaks, and then put all the equipment into it, which consists of the filters, and then the green algae stuff, the rock, and basically and a return pump so that the water can go back into the tank. And then for the last part of the project was a close phase, which I'm thinking for this project will be receiving feedback from my customers, which in this case it'll be Professor Paradise. And you all let me know how I did with this, and if you enjoyed it. And if not, that's fine too. I'll try to do better next time. So next I wanted to present to you a drawing, a picture of a sump tank, so you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about now. Basically, you can see you have your different sections there. You have a tank. The first section there is where your filters are going to go. That's where your skimmer will go. So the water will come down from the tank into that first section. It'll get filtered with, depending on what type of filter you have. There I'll have a skimmer filter and a canister filter. Just for additional filtration. And then from there, it'll go into another section which is called the refugium, and there is where you can have some rock and some sand and the algae, which also filters the water. You can add a light to that section also to help the algae grow. And that's a real important part, I think, of the actual sump tank is the refugium. So if you ever hear anybody talking about a refugium when that has a tank, now you kind of know what they're talking about. And then from there it goes into another section, which for the most part what it does is it makes the bubbles actually stay towards the top, and the water goes through the bottom of that section so that the bubbles don't follow, and so that when the water comes back into your tank, it's nice and clear and it has no bubbles. So basically that is a description of what the sump tank is, the idea behind a sump tank and what it should look like. All right, so next I wanted to just show you, I went to Lowe's like I said earlier, and I had my local Lowe's guy, really nice guy, cut some acrylic pieces for me, and you can see the few clips here that I have on them, and so I ended up coming home with 4 nice pieces of cut acrylic. And on this next slide here you can actually see the 4 pieces along with the aquarium there in the back, and some silicone that I use as well. Not a lot of materials, and so that's the deal. That's what I'm going to be working with. Okay, so the partitions have now been placed inside of the tank, and they've been siliconed, and I let it sit for 48 hours. So the silicone's been drying for a couple days, and now I've placed it under the tank, as you can see, and I've added water to it. Now along with the water, I also added in the center section some sand, which is going to help with filtration, also a live rock, and some algae. Now you can see the water right now is pretty cloudy, and it's going to be like that for a little while until the water settles because of the sand. In the next slide here, you're going to see where I've added the equipment, the filtration equipment now. So I have my skimmer in there, my filter, the return pump, and of course the light. So now I have all the filtration equipment in it, and I'm going to get ready to actually connect it to the aquarium. It's not connected to the tank yet. Right now it's by itself. It's running solo, but I'm getting ready to add the hose that's going to bring the water down from the tank, and the return hose that'll bring the water back in. So here we go. So now you can see I've done that. You can see now the water in the tank is getting a little cloudy, and that's because of the water coming up from the bottom, which was had the sand. So now that's brought it into the main display tank, but that's fine. Eventually that's going to clear up, so that shouldn't be an issue. So I'll leave this running. Everything's running great right now. There aren't any leaks. As you can see, I've already taken all the equipment out of the tank, which was one of the main benefits of doing this. And once it clears up, I'll take another picture and maybe some video, and I'll show you how nice it looks once everything has settled. Alright, so we're doing good. Alright, so I let the tank settle overnight, and now here we go. Here's a picture of what the tank looks like once it's settled. I see how clear the water is now. You don't have the filtration equipment inside of it, and I believe it looks a lot better. If you notice, I have 2 different lights. I have the natural looking light, and then there's a blue light. Actinic is what it's called. That's the only difference there. I just wanted you to see the difference in the lighting. And then some pictures of some of the stuff in the tank, and a little video. So that is it for the most part. I would say that the project was successful. Going to finish it up here, I want to discuss real quick the budget, which was, I did go over budget a little bit. I initially didn't account for the equipment that I needed to purchase. So it just all depends on how you look at it. If you're looking at just the tank itself or the sump, then I did okay. But once I added in the additional equipment, the filtration equipment, I went way over budget. So I guess I would have to say that's something to think about in the initial phases of the project, is what, in addition to what you're actually doing, are going to be additional costs that are going to contribute to your project that you need to consider also. So that was my mistake when I did my initial planning. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video, the presentation, and that is all I have. Thank you very much.